Good evening. Welcome to my channel. My name is David Okun. I've been talking about Brexit. Brexit was when the United Kingdom left Britain, and I'm connecting Brexit with the cost of living. The cost of living has been a topic I have conducted since starting this channel. And the cost of living is an income problem mostly affecting people in developed world, in the developing world, and across the globe. And this phenomenon is actually affecting people on low income. And Brexit, in my opinion, and also in my proposition, is fundamentally responsible for causing the cost of living. And I've been discussing many other topics associated with this problem. And this problem, like I said in the other videos, if you watch them, is associated with the economic system of capitalism. Capitalism is designed to help the few and not the many. So the majority of people, especially in the Western world, where the extent of capitalism now focuses on the market economic system, other than actually allowing the state to intervene in favor of those who are actually suffering as a result of having experiencing low income. And in the UK, in the Western world, these features in factors such as the cost of living. We have discussed this, and I'm going to look at how I'm going to look generally at Brexit when the event when Britain left Europe, and linking this with the cost of living. We are going to look at the timeline. This is actually a segment, a segment of events underlining Brexit. When the United Kingdom conducted a referendum on the 23rd of June 2016, in which 51.89% voted in favor of leaving the European Union, and 48.1% voting to remain as members, or as in the membership of the European Union. Uh, the British Prime Minister resigned as a result of this, because David Cameron, British Prime Minister at that time, was campaigning for Britain remaining in Europe. So within the constitutional and I think also the legal framework, he resigned because he lost the argument. His argument was for Britain to remain in Europe, but also, as I mentioned in the other videos, it was David Cameron who who promised actually the British people to a referendum to decide whether or not to remain in Europe. And like I said in the other videos, this was a mistake, because normally in Britain we operate a representative democracy where the British people vote for a government to lead the country on their behalf. And issues like Brexit, for British people and also even for government officials, is very complex, and normally it creates a lot of problems politically and also, as we have seen, economically, when the government uh, involve ordinary people, or even normal MPs can struggle to deal with the complexities of the European Union, and Brexit is actually part of the European Union. and this created a lot of problem in Britain. But ultimately, when Britain left the European Union, Brexit created in significant way the current cost of living crisis. So, as I've said elsewhere, within this process of video and programming, I said that Britain actually left on the 29th of March 2017, and a new British government led by Theresa May. Theresa May was actually the prime minister who replaced David Cameron within the Conservative Party. And she formally notified the European Union of Britain's intention to withdraw from Europe. This process was actually to begin with what's something called Brexit negotiation. As you remember, those who were following events, Brexit negotiation became a very complex and costly function in different ways. So the withdrawal, which was actually originally scheduled on the 29th of March in 2019, was delayed by a deadlock in the British Parliament after the June 2017 general election, which resulted in a hung parliament in which the Conservatives lost their majority but remained the largest party. So Theresa May, when she came into power as prime minister, decided to call a snap election. She called a sudden election in Britain, and unfortunately, the Conservative had the majority under David Cameron, former British Prime Minister, and the Conservative Party lost this majority. And in Parliament, when you have a majority, it's easy for the government actually to run the country. When the Conservative Party, being in government, lost the majority, they faced so many political challenges in Parliament because they became weak and being unable to run the country effectively. This was created by Brexit, and the Brexit created a problem for the British government, which actually distorted the instrument of rule in this country and creating a lot of problems for the government politically, but also in terms of other factors, including destroying the economy of Britain, which now has resulted in the cost of living crisis. And this deadlock led to 3 extensions of UK's Article 50 process. Article 50 is a law which actually which implements Brexit. So the deadlock was resolved after a subsequent general election which was held in December 2019. This was under a new Prime Minister of the Conservative, because Theresa May resigned and Boris Johnson became the new Prime Minister. In that election, Conservatives who campaigned in support of a revised withdrawal agreement led by Boris Johnson won an overall majority of 80 seats. So the electoral argument of Brexit helped the Conservatives. The Conservatives, under Boris Johnson as the new leader and Prime Minister of the Conservative Party, focused on Brexit as a single electoral issue, and he successfully conducted that campaign, and they won an unprecedented majority in Parliament. So the Conservatives had a huge political gain because of the crisis of Brexit. So you can say the Conservatives who created the problem of exit actually gained from the problem they created. So they kind of like reaped what they really sowed in a bad way, because eventually Brexit became a major problem, as it still is, featuring now in the cost of living. So after the December 2019 election, the British Parliament finally ratified the withdrawal agreement with the European Union Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020. So that is the law. The law is called European Union Withdrawal Agreement Act of 2020. The UK left the EU at the end of the 31st January 2020 at 11 p.m. at night. So these are actually the chain of events leading to the Brexit, the story of Brexit, as it is illustrated in this material. This began a transition period that ended on the 31st December 2020 at 11 p.m., during which the UK and the EU negotiated their future relationship. Within the transition period, this allowed Britain and the European Union to discuss the mode of relationship, political, commercial, economic, you name it. And also, during the transition, the UK remained subject to EU law and remained part of the European Union Customs Union and the European Single Market. In other words, Britain left Europe, but during the transition period, it remained in Europe, subject to European Union law. If you watch my other videos, I actually try to explain the power of the European Union law over the member states, which Britain was for Brexit. And during transition period is the period when Britain was negotiating how the best way to leave the European Union. And during this period, Britain remained in Europe, and in effect, it remained part of the customs union and the European single markets. The European single market is actually a trading platform within the European Union, which member states actually have exclusive access to, and this is actually losing the single European single market by Britain leaving Europe, the European Union, has been central in explaining why Britain economically became worse off as a country. And every time Britain gets into trouble economically, and because of the market mechanisms, the British people actually suffer. The ordinary people of Britain and the ordinary people of the world, because of globalization. Britain creates problem economically, and the rest of the world catches the problem. And normally, people who are actually normal people, ordinary people in society, are the ones who suffer the cost of living. And this is actually the kind of things I've been trying to explain, to link what is now a problem, the cost of living problem, with the current state of the economy of Britain, as I'm trying to explain. However, it was no longer part of the European political bodies or institutions. Now, when we talk about political bodies, we are actually contrasting this with the economic and other factors. And this statement here is inaccurate because when you talk about political bodies and institutions, they are interlinked with the economic and the political and social and all the other factors in society. They are not mutually exclusive. Or so when we say Britain was no longer part of the European political bodies or institutions, that is wrong. Because if you are actually in Europe with respect to the European Union customs and the single market, which is actually economic, but I already explained elsewhere that the difference between economic and political is theoretical. In practice, politics is actually economy. You cannot have one without the other. So when Britain left, or it didn't leave, it will always be politically and economically in Europe. Every time it leaves any elements, Britain leaving any element of the economy, with the as as being connected with the European Union. Although we will be told Britain left the political and the institutional element. That is actually doesn't make sense, because when we talk of institutions, institution controls uh, the economy, it controls the society, things like the border controls and things like that. So the withdrawal had been advocated by hard Eurosceptics and opposed by pro-Europeans and soft Eurosceptics, with both sides of the argument spanning the political spectrum. So the history of Europe has divided Britain and the globe, especially part of Europe are involved in the membership of the European Union. There are groups of extremists, like I said in the other video, who always advocate for remaining in Europe, and there are, as always, the other which advocate leaving. And politicians uses the media and all the other instruments to actually basically confuse the British people, because British people are not politicians. And these disagreements are actually political, mainly ideological. They are not really important, they are not tangible. And in terms of the country, whether Britain stays in Europe or not, may or may not even be important, because we are global countries with or without Europe. The function of the European Union is actually to strengthen globalization, which is a great achievement. So it is actually ridiculous to try and suppose that Britain can leave Europe, because in practice, I mean, it doesn't make sense that Britain tells us that they're leaving Europe, the European Union, because European Union is a completed project, and Britain has been at the core of the European Union. It's a completed project, and how can you leave a completed project? Where will you go? Because European Union is connected to America, connected to Australia, connected to the Middle East, connected to Africa. And so this process began since the 70s and the 80s. And the advocates to withdraw from the European Economic Community, the EC, European Community, was often advocated mainly by the political left also, and in the Labour parties, especially around 1980, within the 1983 election manifesto. So you got the extremists in the left wing and in the right wing, like I said in the other video, who actually, for reasons known to them, tend to oppose one thing and support another. Currently, the extremists on the Conservative Party are actually called right wing, and the extremists in the Labour Party are called left wing. The left wing in the Labour Party tend not to like European Union, but more latently, more strongly on the right wing of the Conservative Party, like we have now. They are the people creating problems to do with the European Union. They are called Eurosceptics. And they are the one now dominating the Conservative Party in the UK as a government, and are creating all sorts of chaos. In the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party, led by a rebellion over the ratification of the treaty, and with the UK Independence Party, there is another political party called UKIP. UKIP the pound. That's their slogan. And it's a new political party whose sole objective, more or less, is to leave Europe. They don't want immigrants. The European Union, the Euroscepticism is closely associated with racism in the UK, because, if everyone is a racist, let's be clear about this. In every country there is racism. In Britain there are racism. In Africa, as a continent, in Europe as a continent, in America, in Australia, New Zealand, in the West, in the East, everywhere in the Middle East. Everyone in the world is racist. And the racism means you don't like foreigners in your territory, in your country. And this is a problem in Britain, featuring in factors like immigration policy. And people understand um, Brexit in terms of immigration policy. And the primary motive of the Conservatives, and maybe also the Labour Party on the left, on the extreme left, their primary motive is actually something called movement of people within the European Union relationship with member state, and it is this element which actually the Conservative Party on the right wing, but the Conservative Party generally, and Eurosceptic also generally, are opposed to. They're opposed to people coming into Britain, and they're opposed to the free movement element of the European Union. And so they cannot say that for fear of looking bad, because it looks bad if you. Racism looks really, really bad. And people who are racist, which is actually most people being racist, live in denial because they're embarrassed about it. They know it is wrong, but it is the way they are. It's just racism. And so this creates a lot of problem. The whole Brexit saga. And now it has actually evolved into an economic crisis, featuring in the form of the cost of living as a crisis. And so the story is such that there are other cross-party people's pledge campaign that led to a collective campaign, particularly after the Treaty of Lisbon was also ratified by the European Union Amendment Act 2008. And without being put to a referendum following previous premise to hold a referendum on ratifying the abandoned European Constitution, which was never held. Generally, government avoid referendum because it's it creates a lot of political problems. These are complex technical issues which even politicians do not understand to deal with. Only select individual experts advise the government on the issue of European Union. That's why matters to do with statecraft, the administrative, constitutional, the legal perimeter of rule is so complex that normally in practice the country leaves this to experts. They elect politicians who are advised by experts on the technical issue of, say, for example, European Union. So referendum was false, was fake. It was actually a political dishonesty by the Conservative Party to create Brexit. By, calling for a referendum in Britain. And so after promising to hold a second membership referendum if his government was elected, Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron held this referendum in 2016. Cameron, who had campaigned to remain, resigned after the result was succeeded by, and after the result, and was succeeded by Theresa May. I've mentioned this point already, and on the 29th of March 2017, the British government formally began the withdrawal process by invoking Article 50 of the Treaty of European Union, Treaty on European Union, with permission from Parliament. Prime Minister May called a snap general election in June 2017, which resulted in a Conservative minority government supported by the Democratic Unionist Party. The Democratic Unionist Party are actually in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, like I said in the other video, is actually part of the United Kingdom because of historical and past political reasons. The UK EU withdrawal negotiation began later that month. So this is actually the chain of events, as I'm trying to explain. But my intention is to actually discuss the European Union, UK leaving the European Union, and actually justify the proposition that this event is a significant cause of the cost of living. So the UK negotiated to leave the EU customs union and the single market. So the customs union, it relates to traveling between Europe and traveling of people and goods, mainly of goods. That's what the single customs union means. And the single market is what you sell and buy within the European Union. Trade, mainly trading with Europe, trading between member states and the European Union, which Britain, in theory, have compromised its position and probably have lost in terms of the advantages he enjoyed before leaving the European Union. This resulted in the November 2018 withdrawal agreement, with the British Parliament voted, but the British Parliament voted against ratifying in 3 times. These are actually events which took place in Parliament, and political problems created by Brexit. The Labour Party wanted an agreement to maintain a customs union, while many conservatives opposed the agreement financial settlement, as well as the Irish backstop designed to prevent border controls between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So the Irish backstop, it was part of the customs union, involving traveling between the north and the south of Ireland. But the Northern Ireland is part of the UK, so that became a problem, because in as much as Britain has left Europe, and in as much as Britain and Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland want a smooth flow of goods and services between the borders, because the Irish Republic remain part of the European Union, but Northern Ireland, being part of the UK, had left. So they needed to negotiate how to travel between north and south of Ireland, south of between the borders. But also, the Conservatives were unhappy about the financial settlement, because you see, membership of the European Union involved a contract, and when Britain left the European Union, it was in breach of the contract, and he had to pay a lot of money. It's called divorce settlement. The terminology used is divorce settlement, which is a lot of money, which actually the Conservatives were not happy politically, because they told the British people leaving Europe was actually financially advantageous, which it wasn't, because it was costing a lot of money to leave. And they didn't want that for political reasons, because they had to explain to the British people, how come you didn't tell us about all these problems? And so they were not interested in that area of the negotiation where Britain had to pay for leaving European Union, because it was in breach of contract. The Labour Party were more interested in customs union, because customs union, it relates to development. See, goods and services flowing in and out. But the problem with customs union is that it involves also free movement of people, which the Conservatives do not want, but the Labour Party want that, because the Labour Party benefit from people coming from Europe to work in the UK, for example, in the NHS, and public policies, social policies, such as the NHS, and maybe transport and things like that, benefit the Labour Party politically, but it doesn't. It doesn't actually necessarily electorally. It works at it put the Conservative at a disadvantage because the Conservative rely on immigration. He has to tell the British people every time there's an election. The Conservative tell the British people that we are going to stop people coming to Britain, and we are going to control crime, and we are going to manage the economy, and we are going to improve security. And these are the electoral strength of the Conservative Party. So, you see, these political dynamics in Westminster was responsible for creating a lot of political and administrative problems in Britain. And the Liberal Democrats, Scottish National Party, SNP, and others sought to reverse Brexit through a proposed second referendum. These are some of the political arguments between Liberal Democrats, which is actually one of the parties in Britain, and Scottish National Party, which operates in Northern Ireland. And so it's just, to put it mildly, Brexit created a mega problem. It was a political mess. It was an economic, catastrophe for Britain, Europe, and the globe. Because if Europe is in trouble economically, the whole globe is going to be in problem. So you can see why I am actually suggesting that Brexit has been a mega problem in terms of the cost of living. So, having failed to get her agreement approved, May resigned as Prime Minister in July and was succeeded by Boris Johnson. He sought to replace parts of the agreement and vowed to leave the EU by the new deadline. On the 17th of October 2019, the British government and the European Union agreed a revised withdrawal agreement with new arrangements for Northern Ireland. Parliament approved the agreement for further scrutiny but rejected passing it into law before the 31st of October deadline and forced the government through the Ban Act to ask for a third Brexit delay. An early general election was then held on 12 December. The Conservatives won a large majority in that election, with Johnson deciding that the UK would leave the European Union in early 2020. The withdrawal agreement was ratified by the UK on the 23rd January and by the EU on the 30th January, and it came into force on the 31st of January 2020. Thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next segment of explaining Brexit process and linking the same with the cost of living. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed, and thank you for your support. Thank you. Bye-bye.